practice more.
I'm not done! What's this? Why aren't you down yet? What's keeping you standing up still? You can't keep me down! I will never be crushed, not now or ever!
What happens when you finally get the one thing you've spent your entire life chasing? I mean, really think about it. You grind, you bleed, you sacrifice everything for years just to reach that one specific milestone. And then you do it. You win. You beat the final boss. But what happens the morning after? Rival characters in anime, and especially in Beyblade, are usually written to disappear once they lose or once their arc is wrapped up in a neat little bow. They serve their purpose, they push the protagonist to the next level, and then they fade into the background like an NPC who ran out of dialogue options. But Kyoya Tategami? Kyoya never did that. Throughout the Metal Saga, he was treated like a case study for the energy of each season, for better or for worse. In the final episode of Metal Fury, we saw the opening curtains for Jinga and Kyoya's final battle. We never actually found out how it ended. The screen fades to the earth, the credits roll, and we're left to imagine the outcome. But I'm gonna take a ballsy approach here, and I'm gonna make Kyoya win that battle. Why? Because we need to explore the story after the victory. We need to explore his true philosophy as a person. Beating Jinga defined Kyoya's entire character for 3 straight seasons. Now that that goal has been achieved, what happens when your reason for grinding is just gone? A lot of us spend years chasing something, but the danger isn't just not getting it, it's what happens when we do and what we may have to sacrifice in order to get there. Now, let's rewind for a bit. Kyoya's story in Beyblade Beyond graduates from being about beating Jinga. It becomes about rediscovering his purpose after that goal is complete. But to understand that, we have to look at how he was used up until that point. Thank you. Kyoya was always a case study for the plot. In Metal Fusion, he's a demonstration of Jinga's positive influence, going from a ruthless, arrogant gang leader to being taken advantage of by Doji in order to awaken the Dark Bay, to reluctantly helping out Jinga and his friends, to fully embracing and preaching the Blader's spirit. In Metal Masters, he takes that spirit and shocks those who have shortcutted their way to victory. He proves that hard work and raw grit means something in the face of artificial enhancements and bays forged by fate. Kyoya has always been a tool for the plot to progress, but in Metal Fury, it becomes abundantly clear that being a plot device may not always be a good thing for his character. He suddenly regresses into this petulant prick who denies ever having needed friends or allies and just storms off during what might be the most pivotal story arc in the entire fucking show. Then he has to relearn his lesson about embracing friendship and respecting Jinga and all that other bullcrap that he literally already learned 3 seasons ago because the plot needed to go the way it needed to go in order for him to get the Mesoamerica and find the legendary Blader and create the barrier, the Zeus's barrier, all that plot bullshit, right? What I'm basically saying is that this translates to bullshit.
Please wait for me! Don't follow me!
Here's a hard pill to swallow about Kyoya. If you take the prospect of beating Jinga away, he ends up being an extremely basic character. We don't know much about his wants, his needs, his fears, or his hobbies. He is essentially a walking plot device carried by pure, unadulterated aura. And honestly, that's actually fine for a while. I don't have a problem with that. It works for the story when the story meshes seamlessly with that mindset. The Metal Saga is the most Beyblade show, as in everything in universe revolves around this one hobby, which can leave characters feeling hollow once their very linear purpose in the story has been fulfilled. After the battle, what is he there for? We saw the result of that lack of direction through his complete lack of appearances in Shogun Steel. I mean, he had one cameo, but you know what I'm talking about. He just vanished. So let's rewrite that ending. Let's say Kyoya's story isn't actually about finally beating Jinga, it's about what comes after the goal is achieved and there's nothing left to chase. His arc begins where Metal Fury ends, with one last battle between him and Jinga. At that point, Jinga's Pegasus had absorbed the power of every Bey on Earth to defeat Nemesis. Although Pegasus didn't retain all that power, Jinga developed a new enlightened understanding of his Bey. And so Kyoya was backed against the corner. But he didn't stop. He pushed himself further, remembered the battles and the training he underwent to reach this point, and challenged Jinga head to head, and when the smoke cleared, Leone just barely remained spinning. In a quaint, nearly empty WBBA stadium, the site of the last of their legendary clashes, Kyoya Tategami beat Jinga Hagane and subsequently became the strongest blader on Earth. And then, nothing. For years, Kyoya had built his entire identity around this rivalry. Every drop of sweat, every roar of his Bey, every waking moment was dedicated to surpassing Jinga. And once it was over, so was his purpose. The Face Hunters had long disbanded, and Jinga's old crew had gone their separate ways. All Kyoya had left was Nile and Team Wildfang, the only collective that hadn't disappeared into the wind. It was Nile who took him in as a brother. At first, Kyoya felt pathetic relying on others. Once a lone wolf and the undisputed leader of the Face Hunters, he saw dependence as a weakness. He was the guy who tore through tornadoes and shattered rocks with his bare hands. Asking for help? Leaning on someone else? This was uncharted territory. But with time, he stopped seeing it as neediness and started seeing it as something closer to family. Wildfang evolved from a competitive team into a haven. Together, they began taking in stray bladers with no direction. Kids who reminded Kyoya of who he used to be back when he was just an angry kid, breaking bays in a warehouse. And with them, Kyoya became a teacher. A hard ass, sure, but a good one. But his status as a mentor signals him maturing and passing on power instead of chasing it. Unlike Beyblade Beyond's Jinga, who walked away from being the savior and trusted in his friends to protect the world, Kyoya needed to learn to embrace the role of status he created through his strength in battles. He needed to become a true pack leader. Not some kind of tyrant, not a lone wolf, not a fucking edgelord, but a leader who builds others up. His Bey, now Duo Leone T125DS, reflects that profound change. It's less attack-oriented, signaling that Kyoya's hunger for victory with reckless abandon has finally been controlled. Instead of the jagged, aggressive contact points seen on Rock or Fang Leone, Duo Leone's fusion wheel is completely round and heavily focused on stamina and defense. Formed by a series of spirals that resemble wind gushes, the dual wheel creates a triple-layered shell when combined with the Metal Leone energy ring and face ball. This perfectly balanced circular design allows Leone to spin cleaner and calmer, absorbing hits rather than seeking to overwhelm its opponents. The Tornado 125 spin track features 4 upward-facing wing protrusions designed to generate a sustaining vortex of air, allowing Kyoya to create more focused, controlled tornadoes rather than the wild, destructive storms of his past. Beneath it, the Defense Spike Performance Tip, a hollowed-out defense ring with a spike tip embedded inside, helps the Bey maintain its balance and hold its ground in the center of the stadium. Together, these parts build a Bey that's a mechanical reflection of a man who has outgrown the need to dominate and stand alone, choosing instead to be the unshakable foundation for his new-found family. That feeling of emptiness after a massive victory, that feeling is all too real. When you finish a comic you've worked on for years, win an award, or even finally, prove them wrong, the silence afterwards hits like a truck. This transition mirrors something I've felt myself. For years, I threw my entire identity into the Changers, into proving I mattered as a creator, that my art and my voice deserved space in this crowded internet. I pushed myself to exhaustion in college and art. I fought to prove the Changers mattered. And although I didn't realize it at the time, it worked. I succeeded in a lot of those goals. I won. I published a book at 21. I got into a top art school. My YouTube channel actually started getting views. I made things people actually cared about. But then came the silence after the praise. It was just me and the work. That void opened up and I was left with the question, what's next? Who am I if I'm not fighting for something external anymore? Who am I without the pursuit? What does true value actually look like? Kyoya embodies that exact feeling, but he rebuilds. He turned the Face Hunters, a once feared street gang, into a space for others to grow. He started pouring into others the way he once poured everything into himself. That mirrors the transition we all have to make at some point, when the hustle stops being about validation and starts being about healing and connection. Shifting from trying to prove your art to letting it build something real for others. Kyoya's real victory wasn't with Jenga, it was in what came next. And sometimes that's more powerful than any physical win. It was Kyoya's victory over Jenga that inspired him to travel the world, by the way. The point is, you can outgrow your rival, your grind, and even your old self. Kyoya ends up finding freedom that way, but almost in an opposite philosophy to Jenga. Where Jenga found freedom in stepping back, Kyoya found freedom in stepping up for others. And I find this principle connecting to my own original work. And at the end of the day, in order to mature and reach full circle as a character, Kyoya had to realize that a lion's pride is in his pack.
That's it, buddy.